Well, welcome back. We're at the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski here at Hopkins and looking at Kathy Forbush, MBA, MS, Executive Director for HR Talent Management at Johns Hopkins University, the entire university, charged with learning, organization development. You're going to want to slide on back to episode number 240, entitled Identifying and Fixing Where Faculty Struggle with Leadership. Here we are in a reunion episode. Kathy, thank you so much for coming back and doing this with me. I can't wait to talk with you.
I always enjoy talking to you, Kim, and I'm happy to help in any way I can to help faculty grow and develop. It's an
Thank you so
honor.
much. Oh, you're the best. And folks, you've heard me, if you've been listening to the Faculty Factory podcast for a while, you've heard me mention leadership competencies, talk about leadership. We've had many guests who've talked about it and what they do at their institutions, how they navigate it, how they've approached the challenges with it. Kathy Forbush here at Johns Hopkins University is a critical key player in leading our recent effort in updating our older competency model. So I've mentioned before in another episode, it was years ago, maybe a dozen or so years ago, that someone, it was before Kathy and my time, came up with a leadership competencies. There are 12 of them, and I'll just mention them. So 12, what are competencies? They're just someone decided that these attributes or characteristics exemplify good leadership. They are establishing relationships, developing talent, inspiring and motivating others, demonstrating emotional intelligence, acting with integrity, acting strategically, managing and championing change, navigating organizations, communicating effectively, promoting diversity and inclusion, holding self and others accountable, and enabling innovation through creativity. So Kathy has been, as I mentioned, leading this effort to say, okay, these 12 were great. And we're going to kind of do an update, an overhaul, and we're going to make them, I guess, smaller, fewer. And I'll have you tell everybody how that process has worked. But I invited Kathy back purposely to kind of get into her brain and understand in her world of expertise around leadership and organization development, how one identifies leadership competencies in a particular culture or institution, how that process has worked for her as she's been leading that. Where are we at Hopkins in this journey? And then we're going to finish up with a little special episode because she is also really expert at something else. And I'm not going to tell you now because you have to stick around and wait to hear what she's going to share with us later. But thanks again, Kathy. I wanted to mention something else because you should know if you don't have a leadership program at your institution or leadership programs, plural, like we are very fortunate here at Hopkins, Kathy is one of those people who has developed many leadership programs here at Hopkins for niche audiences, for women, mid-career women, executive, senior leadership career level women, co-ed programs, university-wide. So she's one of these people who develops and designs and then instructs, evaluates. She's part of the whole process of leadership development. So I'm going to be quiet. Pinky to pinky, I'm going to be quiet. Kathy, please walk us through this journey of how you've developed this model, how this has worked out, and where we are in this process.
Yeah, it's a great. Thanks again for inviting me. It's been a really interesting process, and it's an important. It's been a really inclusive process of lots of different voices, which I think is really best practice in competency development. And to your point, competencies are that it's kind of a combination of skills, behaviors, ways of operating, being in the world that organizations identify are most conducive to success in a particular organization. And for those of you who are listening out in the world that are not at Hopkins, it's highly likely that you have a competency model that is in your organization. I highly encourage you to, if you haven't, Google it in your internal search box, download it, read it, because probably it would be helpful for you to understand what is most valued in your own culture. Our process, one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted with this version to create a competency model that wasn't just about leadership, that was much more inclusive of all of the kinds of employees in the institution, faculty and staff, and to identify the behaviors and competencies that we see most conducive to success at Hopkins. We worked with an external firm to help us do this work. And so part of the initial input that went into this, Kim, was that we looked at things like the strategic framework of the university, the 10 for 1 that we're using here. We looked at the second diversity roadmap on diversity and inclusion to identify thematically what is the institution indicating is important to us. In addition, our consultant did some benchmarking with our peers to identify what competencies are most frequently sought there, because generally what's true for them is likely true for us, and at least as a jumping off point. And then they actually have their own database. And so when you cross-reference all of that, they came up with an initial list of about 12. But they knew that we wanted to streamline and have a little bit more succinct grouping of. And then what happened is we had a series of conversations with leaders all over the country, all over the institution, where we would show them the model, we'd get their reaction, we'd take notes on those conversations, they would build on each other. And from that, we were able to narrow them down to an initial group. And then we took them out and we took them to some different SMEs from across the institution, and we asked for their reaction. And in each case, we started then to also define the behaviors at the different levels of contribution. And at Hopkins, we have 5 different levels of contribution. We have an operational contributor. Those are the folks that are kind of on the front lines or doing more of the routinized tasks that you see each and every day, but are critical to the operation of any institution in higher education or academic medicine. Then we had 2 different versions of individual contributor, kind of early career or early in their career individual contributors, as well as what we'd call more advanced, so more proficient, more recognized as expert. And then 2 levels of leadership, a management and then an organizational leader. And so in each of those cases, as we had the competencies, the 6, then it became 7. I'll talk about that in a minute. We then just started to define the behaviors at each of those 5 levels. What is a behavior? What are in the competency for collaboration? What do we expect collaboration behaviors to look like for an operational contributor, an individual contributor, a manager, and a leader? And we started to define those. So we mapped all that out. And then we went for another round of subject matter interviews from people all over the institution at all different levels of those 5. And then we got their reaction. And then we took this kind of, it developed into this model. We had 6. And then we started then validating it with other folks. And then what emerged is that 1 was missing. And it was on an original draft, but I think in what was happening in the desire of the consultant to streamline, we kept getting this feedback, like 1 feels like it's missing. And that competency, and I'll define we're still finalizing them. So these haven't been entirely published yet, but hopefully by the time this podcast airs, it will be. But these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. And the one, I will do the first 6, then I'll talk about the one that we added. The 6 that we've identified are flexibility and readiness, creativity and initiative, collaboration, decision-making and reasoning, inclusion and belonging, continuous learning. Those are the first 6. And then the 7th we added, which is so Hopkins, pursues excellence.
Pursues excellence. Okay. All right.
And so, it pursues excellence had been tucked in, like some of the language of pursues excellence had been tucked in elsewhere around, often in the continuous learning or in decision-making, flexibility. And people just kept saying, like, it is so core to who we are.
How come that's got to be it? It's gotta be.
So then when I started like sending it out to people, I'm like, this one's emerging, like that it needs to be its own one. And everywhere I went, everyone's like, well, duh, of course. So this is why, good practice in developing a competency model is having lots of eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
And to, from different walks, different schools, different levels of the organization. And I feel like by the time we're done, and it's still going through a few more, dotting I's and crossing T's, but I will be very confident that when we release this model and then the supporting tools that underneath it, and we can talk about that if you want, that this is a model that we can really say really represents who we are as a culture at Hopkins.
Got it. This, congratulations. And I'm just so, intimidated by this work because when I, recall those 12 competencies that I've referred to many times, and we built, our leadership programs around them, and we talk about them in the first day of our leadership courses, like what is leadership, what isn't leadership, and what are the features that we could ascribe to leaders and think of leaders, and what do they cut? And we kind of go through that process of having people think of good leaders and what do they exemplify? What do they exude? What makes them a good leader? And then think of a bad leader and why are they a bad leader? And so we kind of walk them through in a kind of informal way to understand that what you're getting at is these competencies. And then we say, and lo and behold, Hopkins does have core leadership competencies. And then we would we'd pull that thread of competencies through all of our courses over the 6 months and say, reminding ourselves, where are we addressing these competencies and where might we, after today's conversation around having difficult conversations or mediating conflict, where do you see your strengths, your assets, and your challenges in these competencies? Where do you want to explore and learn, go the next step, like the next level up to the next kind of leadership, and how might you explore learning more about communicating effectively? And then the old competencies, like you said, underneath each of those, the rubric, if you will, they'd say, well, if I'm a team leader, I'm an organizational leader, and I'm expected to have these kind of behaviors, here are the resources that will help me. The next page, it always showed, these books or articles or online courses. And so it's not as if we say, go figure it out, Google it. You nicely
Right.
provide those resources. So I'm glad that you're going to be doing that same thing of building in that scaffolding of these are the ideal aspirational goals of what a leader is. And here's some tools and resources to help you get there. So
Yeah.
I think that's great.
We will have all those things. We'll have competency-based interview questions. So when we're interviewing candidates for internal candidates, external candidates, we'll have consistency, which will be far more inclusive in the end, because we're using a standard methodology, because we've identified through this process, these are the competencies, the behaviors, the attributes that we see that are most conducive to success at Hopkins. So we will ask questions in the interview process to affirm that, do these people that we're considering for coming in, or these people we're considering for new roles within who are already here, are they ready to make that next leap? And one of the other things that I like about this model of including operational individual contributors, and this is why it's important for faculty, is that faculty are often in leadership roles and have, students on their teams or staff on their teams. And it'll be really nice that it's the same model. Like, we expect you to be really collaborative and say, guess what? I'm held to that standard to be collaborative. And here's the behaviors I'm held to. Here's the behaviors I'm holding you to. And if you want to advance, these are the kinds of things like you're going to need to, these are the behaviors you need to demonstrate in order to be ready for the next level. But we're all singing off a collaboration competency. It's just the behaviors are going to differ based on your level of contribution in the organization. But we're saying in a consistent way that collaboration, like this whole place runs on collaboration, right? Nothing happens without collaboration here. And so we're saying that no matter if you're the dean of the school, down to the person who is managing the grant or scheduling the appointments or scheduling the patients to come in, that there's an expectation of collaboration. It may look different and how it's applied, but we are all expected to collaborate. We're all expected to pursue continuous learning. We're all expected to pursue excellence, right? We're all expected to be really thoughtful in how we make decisions. We're all expected to be inclusive and create environments that all people feel like they belong. So we're holding everybody to a same standard. Aspects of it will change based on your level. I think that's going to be huge game changer and kind of making it really much more clear and basically saying what I'm held accountable for, you're held accountable for. It's just how it manifests itself is different.
Kathy's so super smart. And what I think is one of the important components of this competency-based interviewing guide that you're talking about is that you are setting the stage at the interview. So we're going way back in the genesis of this process of like, hey, you've interviewed for a job here at Hopkins, or again, for listeners around the world, fill in the name of your institution. You're interviewing, you are inquiring about a position. Let us help inform you about the culture here beyond mission, vision, values, or a link to a website. We're setting the stage with these competencies that also, not only is it to me how we do things around here that we're really trying to blow open, really make it very evident what the culture is, and also setting the expectation that we're all leaders, that leadership is not something that after your 1-year anniversary, your 2 or your 3-year annual review, hey, have you ever thought about leadership? Staff person, early career faculty person, mid-career faculty. No, this is like at the beginning. This is way at the beginning. This is not something that you might want to think about leadership. You've kind of, you've democratized, if you will, leadership and taken it away from this kind of an elite concept of certain people may be put on this leadership track. And instead, you're doing what we talk about all the time, is that you're helping people realize you are empowered. There are expectations. And you're already, by virtue of being here, you are a leader. Ready, set, go. And we're all on these tracks from the beginning. This is not optional for you. But it's an expectation that you are a leader by being here, and we're going to help you. We're going to help you grow through the trajectory of your career. We're not cherry picking certain people. It's wide open. Everybody has access to this. And that's what I really love, that idea of your taking out from an exclusive kind of a club to, hey, this is it. This is our culture. This is where we grow leaders, period.
Yes. Yes. And I think the other thing is it becomes a criteria for how we evaluate performance. So often, and you and I've talked about this even in the first podcast, right, is that the what you deliver is super important here. Super important. Like, get the publications out, be a great teacher, be a great clinician, or some combination of all three, many cases, all three. But the how you deliver, the how you go about it, and whether you're leaving dead bodies in your wake or people want to follow you is really important. And so the competencies become, so if you think about like when you're goal setting for the year, all the stuff you're going to accomplish, I'm going to get this many publications out. And by the way, our publication came out today that we worked on together around early career. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, but wait, tell people the title, because I'll link it in your episode. What's the title of it?
Yeah, it's called Inspiring and Preparing Our Future Leaders, Evaluating the Impact of the Early Career Women's Program, Leadership Program. And it was great to collaborate with you and so many of our colleagues at Hopkins. And I'm really excited that this article came out today.
How ironic and what a coincidence. Dr. Jenny Lee Summers, our Senior Associate Dean for Women here at Hopkins. Yeah, she's a go-getter, man. Thanks to her.
And it's in the Journal of Healthcare Leadership. So anyway, the point, like, so if you're documenting what your goals are for the year, part of how I want us to get comfortable evaluating if you're successful or not is not just the what. Did you hit all those milestones? But how did you do the work? Were you collaborative? Were you inclusive in your process? Did you demonstrate flexibility when inevitably something didn't go according to a plan that you had laid out? And so culturally, I want us to get comfortable with not just the what you deliver, but the how you deliver. And together in combination, those are the kinds of leaders we're going to want to follow, is the kinds of people that demonstrate that those attributes that we've identified in the competency model, so that not only are you delivering what we expect you to do in terms of your publication rate or your evaluation, your student
RVUs. Yeah.
evaluations or RVUs or whatever it is. But again, if you're delivering RVUs and all your mocks are saying that person is terrible, or the nurses are complaining about how you talk to them on the floor, then you're not the leader we want you to be.
Right. Right.
You're just
Right.
not. And
And
so I think it's those things together that make people the leaders we want to
yeah.
follow.
And if we were to embed those competencies, leadership competency, or the principles of the standard operating principles of the Hopkins, or again, fill in the blank, any institution
Yep.
where you are right now, instead of, or in addition to, we haven't required annual review for faculty members, instead of the, as you've mentioned, the litany of how many of this, how much of that did you do, and you're checking boxes, boom, 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 boom. Also have that, build in that space for having naming these competencies and actually having them listed there, and say, being able to have some narrative or some way of wrapping our head around the collaboration, the decision making, reasoning, inclusion, continuous learning, at least if the language is there, even if maybe if it's brand new, we roll it out, people are like, well, of course I'm collaborative. I mean, that's what I work on a team. But actually making people pause and think about that, and having those competencies foremost in our minds, standardized in an annual review format, knowing then that I'm going to be measured on that, like you're saying. This is not just a how much, Kim. Not only do I have to generate, productivity, but then if it's named, if it's amplified, if it's communicated, if it's understood, then in my way of being and living and navigating my life at Hopkins in my daily life, I'm now thinking about those things. Or like, oh gosh, that was certainly not collaborative. Oh my goodness, that
Right.
was not a continuous learning. Or wow, that's an example of, what Kathy just said. That's a perfect example of continuous learning. I'll have to remember that. So now we're putting that thought in our minds, and it's in us, and we're thinking about it. So not only are we thinking about in terms of being measured on it, but it's becoming part of us. And then it's part of our blood and our mindset. It just becomes that way we do things around here. We're all mindful of these guiding principles. So I think I
100%.
love it.
100%. And I think it also will help, particularly for faculty who have direct reports or students and they're trying to guide their development, right? In that you can talk about these concepts, not just the what, right? You can talk about, like, actually, in order for you to, like, get that grant out the door, you need to be a little bit more collaborative with the finance team that's going to be putting the budget together. Like when you barked at them, they're not going to want to, like, turn that around really fast. And we've got a grant deadline. So the importance of being collaborative in order to meet business objectives or, operational objectives, and being able to translate that for people. And then, one of the things we talked about extensively on the last podcast was that not all development happens in the curriculum, a curricular space. And so when I tell you that Hopkins has vast learning offerings, which for faculty and staff, and whether it's classroom courses or our subscriptions to LinkedIn Learning or Academic Impressions and Nature. I mean, I feel like Academic Impressions is like LinkedIn for higher education. I
Yeah.
love their content, and it doesn't talk about companies. It's not very corporate. It's very higher ed kind of focused. And we will be mapping and suggesting, like you said, these competencies to curriculum. But, as we know, and we talked about at the last podcast, so much of our development happens on what we do on the job, or what we do in our professional organization, or what we do in the volunteer things we do in the community. And so developing these competencies, the muscles around that, the skills and the behaviors around being collaborative, being really, thinking critically and solving complex problems, where you're going to get to do that and practice that. You might get a good course on design thinking that would be illuminating for you, but where you're going to get to really learn and build that muscle is on the job or in a volunteer situation or in your professional organization. So, that's what I'm excited about, is that we will be, recommending not only curriculum, but development experiences for
Mm,
folks. That, and we'll build that part out over time. That's going to take us a little bit of time. We'll use some tools that we're going to actually take advantage of in the new calendar year that I'm really excited about. That will help us kind of identify those opportunities, but we'll be really clear that it's not, you're not going to learn all this stuff in a classroom setting or self-paced learning, or even listen, I mean, but a TED talk or a podcast like this one,
right.
um, or what you can do on the job, or what you can do in your work will be really critical.
Kathy Forbush, you are so smart. Um, so you're making me reflect on a conversation I had. I was coaching a faculty member, and they asked me, you know, Kim, on reflection in your career, could you give me like three tidbits? How can I be successful here at Hopkins? And nobody asked me something like that. I don't think ever. So I was like, let me think. And of course, I really, I'm so proud of myself that I actually shut up for a minute and thought versus just started yammering and yammering, which is the way as an extrovert, I just talk to think, right? So I was like, the whole networking thing. And they were nodding their head. And I said, but no, I said, I think I know what you think I'm saying. And what I always thought I knew what networking meant. But to be successful navigating an organization, any organization that's so highly matrixed, very complex systems of leadership and ownership, it's very complicated. It's not networking the way, again, maybe naively, I used to always think of it because I'm like, I'm an extrovert. Networking, next, got it. Wrap, it's a wrap. You don't need to talk to me, Kim Skrupski, about networking. I talk to everybody. I love sitting in the middle aisle of the airplane because I could talk to everybody. I'm a networker. It's in my nature. But no, until I realized, and then in retrospect, this person was really making me think. It was such a great question that early in my career, because I'm a natural extrovert, I thought networking was almost kind of like the, hey, how you doing? I'm Kim. Hey, how you doing? What's your name? What are you doing? Where do you work? What do you? And it was almost like the just being able to talk to people. And that's not networking. And so we had a really nice, deep conversation about recognizing really networking it's an investment of understanding others' motivations and really demonstrating authentic and genuine interest in somebody, in that other person, building relationships. Where are their pain points? What are they excited about? What keeps them up at night? What are they worried about? What are their joys? What are their dreams and hopes? And that sounds like a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot. But that's real networking versus the superficial sticking your business card in somebody's face, and you're at a cocktail party and you're not making eye contact because you're trying to see if that other person walked in behind them, and you got to meet that one and you got to shove your card in that person's face. That's not what I'm talking about. So I'm giving the story because you've motivated me to think that all competencies, whatever, as you mentioned, the rubric or the matrix, the format at someone else's, institution might be that map. Many of us who've gone through, doctor school, they didn't teach us this stuff, but we're like, yeah, networking, got it. Collaboration, duh. I work in a team. Check, 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 check. No, it's not that easy. And because you spell out those behaviors and the knowledge and the attitudes and the skills, it really, having a growth mindset really requires us to be more thoughtful and not to zip through something and say, hey, I have an MD. I get this.
Right.
Really? Maybe not so
Well,
much.
I'm smart about this thing. I must be smart about everything,
Yeah.
right?
And so,
Yeah.
so that's why I think these competencies are so important and really give us pause for reflection on, am I as good as I think I am at that? Because I'll tell you, I wasn't, because
Yeah.
somebody did say to me, you're like a superficial butterfly. And I was like, I beg your pardon? You have this air of being the superficial cheerleader, or like you're just kind of flitting about. And granted, it was an introvert. Introverts, get really turned off sometimes, may get turned off by people like us who are just like, oh, flitting around. And 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 that was like it hurt me to hear that, but it stuck with me. And it's really kind of been a learning lesson for me to be aware of how I am perceived by others. And so my point in kind of rambling here is just to kind of underscore the work you're leading and how um, everything you're putting together, again, just feeds into this idea that we have to go deeper. This is, this work, this requires deep introspection, thought, honesty, and it's the joys of being evolving humans. We're constantly evolving and growing and changing. So I just love this work you're doing, and I think it's so cool. And I'm just so grateful for all that you've done for Hopkins and leadership programs.
Thank you. Well, I think if you look at that collaboration, there's a lot in collaboration. And one of the attributes of collaboration, to build on your point, is builds and maintains relationships. So, one of the things that particularly when people are either new in a role or new to an organization, almost the thing that I hear most frequently that is an indicator that they're going to be successful or not is how curious are they about the new members of their team.
Oh.
And, I do work, often we'll sometimes be asked to do leadership assessments 90 days in or 120 days in of new leaders and new roles. And whether you've been at the institution a long time, whenever you take on a new leader or you take on a new leadership role, you're taking on new stuff. And I can easily tell how well it's going when people will say things like, they actually took an interest in understanding who I was or what I'm working on. Now, some people want to share with all their personal stuff, but some people don't. At a minimum, to be curious about what people are working on and what's important to them. And again, you can be really super when you're a new leader, you can be super busy. You got a lot of stuff going on, you're trying to lots of balls in the air. But I will tell you, the investment you make into you, what you describe, is more deeply trying to understand who each person is as an individual. What are their needs? What are their hopes, aspirations? What do they care about? To ask them, like, tell me what you're working on that you're most excited about. Tell me what you're working on that is most frustrating. Tell me what you're working on that like gets you racing out of bed in the morning. Tell me what like makes you want to put the pillow over your head. Those 4 questions, like early on for a new leader, getting to know individuals on their team, you're going to get so much insight from those 4 questions. So
Kathy,
much.
I'm totally drinking that Kool-Aid with you. Yes. Allow me, please, to play devil's advocate.
Yes.
Well, Kathy Forbush, this is so easy for you to say. Be curious about new people on my team and be interested in them. They rotate through here so quickly. We can't find good people. They don't do their jobs. They don't care about the work they do. They pass the buck. They do as little work as possible. They've quit, but they just never left. They're quiet quit. They're
The
quiet
quiet
quitter.
quitting, yeah.
The quiet. I mean, that kind of. Now, I'm not saying that happens. The grumble butts. They're not all over the place, but we hear that. So,
Sure.
how do how would Kathy Forbush counter that kind of notion of the eye rolling, like, oh, really? I know you don't care what I know. You just want to know that I care. Kumbaya. That's all that kind of soft stuff. Who cares? Hey, we're all here saving lives, finding cures and treatments and preventing. I don't have time. I don't have time to do this, Kathy. Talk to me about that. What would you
Yeah, so we talked about this at the last podcast, and
Right,
I'm going
I
to
know.
kind of reemphasize some of these points again, which is this is the number one thing that employees talk to me about around in terms of their experience with faculty is that they don't care. That, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time someone said to me, my faculty member won't even learn how to pronounce my name correctly
Right.
or say good morning, like basic human behavior. So if you don't think that it's not like, then those people don't care. They're like, they don't care about me. Why should I care about them? Why should I care about their research? Why should I care about making sure their patient files are right? Why should I care about not overscheduling them with patients? Like, and again, I know this is what I'm telling you, and I'm hoping that the faculty that are listening to this will trust me when I tell you people will go through a wall for you if you show them you care about them. They'll work late without complaining. They'll go the extra mile. One of the things that we know about engagement, you know, turnover is a lagging indicator of engagement.
Hang
Discretionary,
on, hang on. Say that again. Turnover is a lagging indicator of engagement. Yes, yes, Kathy. Smart.
discretionary effort is a leading indicator of engagement.
Discretionary effort is a leading indicator. What do you mean by that?
So
Discretionary.
if people are putting in more than you expect,
Leading. Yes,
they're
yes. And
engaged. They'll go the extra mile for you. They'll
right.
come up with that innovative idea. They'll tell you how to do this better, faster, cheaper because they're engaged in their work. Not satisfied. Satisfaction is different. Engagement. And so, I'm telling you this investment, and there's always going to be some turnover. This
Yeah.
labor market still continues to be challenging. The whole working from home, working remote, working on site, like we're still navigating that. We're still navigating a post-COVID world of, um, but I will say that, you're seeing less and less jobs 100% remote. Like that's like,
Yeah.
those are plummeting. So the idea of you having to engage and be on site is, so there's always going to be some of that. And it's because sometimes people like they get here and they're like, this isn't for me. This
Yeah.
work isn't for me. This culture isn't for me. And that's always going to happen. But I will tell you more often than not, people want to stay and they want to be successful. They also want to professionally develop, just like you want to professionally develop and achieve that brass ring of being a tenured faculty member and all the prestige and perks and financial security that comes with that.
Yeah.
Staff are no different. Your students are no different. They want to professionally progress. They want to be successful. They also want to have work. Like one of the things I hear about faculty all the time about, I want to have more work-life balance. I want to be able to do the things I want to do with my loved ones. You know what? I hear you and I feel you, but guess what? Your staff are the same. Your students are the same. And so and one of the things we talked about in the last podcast is this like humanness, is understanding all of the, you're all medical doctors. At the end of the day, we're all flesh, bone, muscle, blood.
We're somebody's daughter, somebody's
We're
partner,
somebody's daughter, we're somebody's child, we're somebody's parent, we're somebody's, um, but we all want to be successful. And most employees, not all, most employees want to be successful. They want you to be happy with their performance.
Of course.
There's always a few bad actors. Again,
Right. Yeah.
not everybody was in the top 50% of their medical school class, right?
Yeah.
Too. Like
Yeah.
we all want to be successful for the most part. But I think that if we can just invest, like fill the cup a little bit, on occasion, and like if someone has a difficult name to pronounce, work at it.
Figure it out. You've learned a lot more difficult things.
Really, exactly. Like you had to learn like all the bones in the body. You had like none of these drugs have like simple names, right?
It can be done.
I'm sure when you took genetics and you had to do the kingdom phylum, subphylum, those were hard things to pronounce.
Come on, chemistry, right? Give me a break.
Right. And so I think, but when you're dealing with humans, our employees want to feel like they matter.
And
again, go ahead.
You're so funny. You're making me think of, so the faculty at school is, but I don't have time. And I'm thinking, you know what? You've been here how long now? It could be, a week, a month, 6 months, 6 years, 16 years. Has anything gotten better? I mean, have you found time? Have things slowed down measurably? This is life. This is how academic medicine rolls. You're never going to have enough time. You're always going to be behind the 8 ball. I don't see any future in academic medicine where it's going to be like old movies where you're strolling around campus and sitting on a park bench and, having a cup of tea, and just chatting by a coffee machine. Those and getting on a bicycle and just kind of going down to the village of Currier and Ives kind of scene of what academia is. That's not reality. It never will be. So knowing that this is the pace, this is what this life looks like, how am I going to choose to be? Human being. I'm a human being, not a human doing. Am I choosing to be? And I'm not saying don't make deadlines, don't make criteria, don't make, meet
Hold
your
people
objectives.
accountable. You can hold people accountable.
Of course. And yeah, guess what? You can stop a minute. Hey, Kathy, how'd it go with, your out of town company? I forgot to ask you. Did you take them there? That exchange tells and does so much. First of all, it slows us down,
Mhm.
makes me refocus. That's right. This is a human, three-dimensional person. Now we're connecting. I maybe have my mind off now of all the things that I had going on, but those moments, I don't have time for those moments. Come on. Those
Yeah,
moments,
and I
those
would even
moments are
say,
going to happen. They're going to
right,
happen. So how do you want to be in those moments?
right. And I would say, even if you're like not comfortable asking them about the personal stuff, and not everybody is, it's okay, but ask them about their work, like those 4 questions.
Yeah.
What is exciting you the most, and what is the most frustrating? What
Yeah.
makes you want to get out of bed in the morning? What makes you put the pillow over your head? Like those 4 questions. Like if you want to, you could stay in the work modality
Sure.
and build your muscle around just asking questions and work up to some of the stuff that's more interpersonal. I
Build
mean,
your
again, if this is, that this is not going to be your sweet spot, that's okay. Not everybody is good at that right away. So stay in the workspace,
love it.
stay in the workspace and get comfortable just asking those 4 simple questions.
You know what? Yeah. And I'm looking at your face now, and I'm just thinking, even the face on your head right now, the smiling eye contact. Oh my gosh. If nothing, I see you, eyes on eyes. I'm not zooming by you. I'm looking at you. I'm smiling minimally. Just I got you. I see you. I see you. I'm smiling at you. You see me. We're busy. A little thumbs up, kind of like eye roll, whatever.
Right.
Connecting. Connecting. It's yeah, it's all good.
It
So
doesn't have to like take 10 hours,
no, right. That's what I
right?
think.
I
People
mean,
like, I don't have a half an hour. Like, who said it has to be half an hour? We're talking this is
10
anyway.
seconds. Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. And I think, as, this podcast is playing at the end of the year, I think what I'd say to faculty as they're, we all do the New Year's resolution thing, why don't you set a goal for yourself that's around your own leadership? Like, where do you want to grow? Where do you want to get better? Whether you use a leadership competency model as a jumping off point, or, maybe you've listened to another podcast or you've taken some training recently around negotiation or interpersonal skills or being a better listener or, being more collaborative or whatever it is. Like, commit yourself to the year ahead. Where do you want to go with your leadership this year? How do you want to be? What do you want to change in yourself? What do you want to try? And, it's just like anything we try, and you got to, again, like a new habit, you're going to have to try it for 21 days in a row in order for it to become a habit. How am I going to, like, maybe I'm going to commit to, a check-in once a month with all the people in my staff for like 50, like 10 minutes, and I've got 16 people in my lab, and there's 20 days in the month of January, and I'm going to make sure I do a 10-minute connection with all 16. And you know what? Then you've got 4 days that if you can't do it, you're good. But, set a goal for yourself and like anything and work at it. And oh, by the way, if you miss a day and it takes you to Valentine's Day to get to all 16 people, that's okay. You still got to the
You did it.
16 people.
Yep. Did it. That's great, Kathy.
So I mean, just don't give up. If you got to get back up on the horse and try again, I guess is what I would say.
Thank you so much. This is such great advice, Kathy. So, little drum roll here. You just said the word a couple times, maybe end of the year, and some of us are in different seasons of life, and our staff, students, faculty, leader, doesn't matter what we are. And we may be thinking about, this next big thing happening to us. I'm going to become a principal investigator. I'm going to get promoted. I want to get promoted. I've been given an opportunity to develop, design, or lead this thing, or manage
I'm going
more
to be a
people.
chair on that committee. I'm going to serve on that
Anything.
committee. Yeah, yeah.
How, in your vast experience, talk to us about navigating change.
Mm, mm. So we could do a whole podcast on that, but let me just hit a couple of
We'll
points.
do it. We're going to do another one, but this is the tickler, the teaser.
Yeah, the tickler for this.
Forbush.
Yeah. So change is something like I've read about extensively and I think about extensively and I talk to leaders about because, this industry is like rapid change every day, right? In academic medicine, higher education, I mean, the whole industry, higher education, I read a quote recently that one institute of higher education is announcing a closure almost one a week right now. So yeah, so higher education is being transformed. And so I think that when you think about change, I think there's a change and then there's a transition. So even change we seek. We become parents, we get married, we move to a new city, we start a new job. Even the things that we seek out, you're still going to be going through a transition of, you're leaving an old reality behind and embracing a new reality. And that space in the middle is both an opportunity as well as can be stressful. And so what are the things that we can do, particularly when we're leading teams from an old reality to a new reality that helps them? The one thing that I tell leaders all the time, the first thing to always remember, particularly if you are the instigator of the change, is that on any change curve, whoever's model, Cotter's model, Bridges' model, whatever model you're looking at, Kubler-Ross's model, you're always going to be ahead of your team.
Mm.
You've thought about it more, you've planned for it more. Mm-hmm. And so part of your job is to bring people along to catch up to you. And so when you're frustrated that they're not moving at the speed you'd like them to move, just recognize that is part of the transition process.
I'm holding up, you can't see this, but you mentioned Cotter's model. So
yeah.
Oh my gosh, Cotter's model of organizational change, 1995. For those of you who don't know that, what Kathy just said, Cotter, Kotter, that's I'm fond of that. Creating
Harvard,
a sense of urgency. Yeah, Harvard, guiding coalition, vision and strategy, communicating change in the envisioning, empowering individuals, generating short-term wins.
Yep.
Sustaining the change and institutionalizing the change. So yeah, there's a whole literature out there. I barely scraped the surface. So I love that you are into that. So we're going to keep talking, but I definitely want to schedule a whole episode on how you think about navigating change.
And there's a lot of overlap. I'm a big fan of Bill William Bridges, who was a big change guru. He wrote the book Managing Transitions. A lot of the things that you just rattled off in the Cotter space, he talks about too. So understand that you're always going to be ahead on the curve. Give a role for people to play. People that are more involved in how the change is manifesting itself become invested in the process. So if there's roles that you can give people to play in redesigning that process or designing that new form, or what are going to be the elements of that database, or whatever it is going to be, give them a role to play and let them go and see what they come up with. Interim wins, short-term wins, celebrate them. There's a lot of hard work that goes into moving organizations forward. And so if you can achieve interim milestones and celebrate them, bring in, donuts or something healthy to celebrate that, or bring in lunch to just acknowledge the work that it took to get to this point. It does two things. One, it acknowledges kind of the hard work. And again, you get to be human, and some of this we talked about earlier, but it also kind of sustains people for the hard work ahead, right?
Yeah.
So, there's still work to do, like to get to fully in the new reality of whatever it is you're trying to implement, a new work structure, a new process, a new system, a new tool, a new whatever, a new procedure for checking in new patients or whatever it is. When you've mastered it, celebrate it. When you've achieved some interim things. And so, and just understand that people's resistance to change come from a couple different places. One, they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like it. And they don't like you. They don't like what maybe not you personally, but they don't like what you represent, or they don't like.
Why is Kathy coming here and changing it? What is Kim thinking?
We were perfectly fine.
We're fine. Thank you very much. And she comes in here wanting to do this, that, and the other. Why does she want to rock the boat? We're perfectly fine. And now she's going to celebrate. She just brought in plate of steamed broccoli to celebrate? Are you kidding me?
Right. We want cupcakes. Yeah. I mean, but just understand that a lot, that first, like the first hurdle you got to do is like, I don't understand it. Like you've got to give information, you got to over communicate, you got to communicate frequently. And if you think just sending one email will get it, we'll cover it. I'm telling you it won't.
Yeah. You can't say, well, I already said this at that meeting 6 months ago. We forgot. People weren't here. They weren't paying attention. My friend Melissa Smith is a marketing communication person, and she always reminds me a communication and marketing is all about a consistent message persistently presented. CCPP,
Yep.
consistent message. I guess it's not CC. Consistent message. No, consistent communication persistently presented. CCPP. But yeah, it's like you say it over and over and over again until you feel like I'm going to bash my head against the wall until you start hearing it repeated back to you. Because we always think, I told him about that. Didn't I already ask for that? Didn't we talk
But that's
about
the
this?
point on the change curve, right? Where I said
Yeah.
you're always ahead. So you're like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I've already told, like, but again, they need to catch up to you. So the reason you need to communicate more than once is because they need to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to give them a role to play. They need to catch up. That's why you want to celebrate interim wins. They need to catch up. It's all
And
about helping them catch up to you.
and reminding them, because how often do we just, plow through things and like get to that difficult end and go, oh, we did it. Phew. Take a couple like, okay, on to the next thing. And you don't even realize, oh my gosh, that's right. We did that. Let's pause a beat here and really look back over our shoulders. You did that. Kathy, you did that. Rachel, you did that. Jenny, Dave, Masaru, not wait. Oh, you're right. We did rewrite that whole thing because it could become so routine that we're just so accustomed to working so hard that that sets a culture of just like, no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough. It's always the next thing. But that moment of literally stop. It's like at the end of the year. Look back at the end of your year and really look at all you did. You beat yourself up all the time. Look at what you've accomplished this year. That is so important to again, solidifying a team, having that shared understanding of, oh, that's right. That was kind of a lot. Do you remember we started that how long ago? Oh my gosh. And I've coached so many people who they're like, why didn't this happen? And then people said they wanted to do it and then they didn't do it. It fell apart and everybody's turning against me and nobody wants to do this. And it's like, that's because it sounds like it was your idea.
Right.
And then it was like her against us or him against all of us. And it sounds like a great idea, but there's a whole thing that has to happen before you have to get everybody on board, right? You can't just say, they could even be like, yeah, that sounds fine, but you're making an assumption, Kathy, that I have nothing else to do, nothing better to do, that your number one priority is also not my one. Do you have any clue of all the stuff I'm doing? Oftentimes as leaders, we don't.
We don't. And that's why, again, you go ask the question, like, what are you working on that you're excited about? What are you working on that's driving you crazy? That's why those questions, and that's why I keep bringing them up. I mean, I tell this story that, there was and I worked all of 2019 on a major project in the university, and it was super hard and lots of politics, and it was really challenging. And we got to the implementation of this major initiative the first week of March of 2020. And I remember walking out of the room that day and being like, okay, now I can go back to all the stuff I was going to work on and like focus on some stuff that got like pushed to the side because this was the focus. And that was like March 7th of 2020. Whoopsie. And then a week later, we were working, 7 days a week. I was doing HR work to try and help you guys do what you needed to do to like in a world that like we literally did not know from one day to the next. And so so even the stuff that like you can plan all you want and even organizationally plan, and then the world changes. And so, but people do get fatigued. And, this idea, like, I'm a big believer of, people need to take their vacation. I just had a colleague who just came back from a week-long vacation. I said, and I jokingly said to her, I'm like, guess what? And the place is still here. And she's like, I know, God, she's like, I literally took my Outlook off my phone for a week. And I was like, good for you. That's good practice. Not everybody can do that, but she's a pretty senior person. She's like, I just needed to do it. So, again, I think that people get tired and we need to be aware of like the constant change is exhausting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the best thing we can do as leaders is acknowledge it and not gloss over it and not say, just like nose to the grindstone, oh well, just say, listen, I know, like this is the last thing we need. Like,
Mm, mm.
you know,
So
but
we're
it is, here we
acknowledging.
are. We've got to now respond to COVID. We now need to come up with all this. Like at that time was like, now we got to pivot and figure out all these human capital procedures around what are we going to do for the people who have to be here, the people that don't have to be here. When we wanted to bring the research back, like what was that going to take, and all the things we had to think about and how to support that. Like that was a ton of work.
Yeah. And
But that's what we had to
good
do.
teams rose to the occasion. Good teams rose with good leadership because they built solid, genuine, authentic relationships that were transformational relationships, not transactional. And then didn't people rise to the occasion? Yes. Didn't people go in above and beyond? Yes. And it starts, I think, with, I mean, that was change thrown at everybody, as you said, on
Correct.
a global scale, but recognizing also if you set up a pattern of realizing with any change that I'm probably ahead of the game because I've been thinking about this way more than they have, and I've been stewing on it, chewing on it. And then when I realize, okay, now I've been thinking about this, I'm going to check my assumptions. I have to bring everybody with me. And now when I bring everybody with me, we start this communication, over communication of who, what, where, when, why, and how. Everybody gets a role. Everybody now owns this project. Now we're all truly, this is not just that person's crazy idea. It's we're all swimming together, mission centric. Yes, we understand it. We may not all be perfectly like kumbayaing about it, but I understand the gap. We understand the need. You are the leader. You're choosing to do this. Okay, count on me. Wonder Twins activate. I'm in it. Tell me what to do. How can I own this? And now you're practicing a team. You're practicing recognizing other people's skills and gifts and talents when they're rocking and rolling, where somebody else is kind of falling down a bit and floundering and helping each other. All those, just life, the grind, that's where teams are tested. Thinking of like wartime metaphors, of course, when you have units and platoons of people, they're tested through those challenges. And I think that is really good advice about managing change in our own lives at a micro, meso, or macro level. I think those two things are important. Recognizing that as a leader, we're way ahead of everybody else. We have to stop a beat, help everybody catch up, and then assigning roles. Anything else before we get into the whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, just bring it back to back to the competencies, right? So what you were just describing in that, when teams can come together for mission to address change that needs to happen, that is kind of quintessential pursuing excellence here, right? I mean, if you think about what we as an institution delivered to the world during COVID,
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, across Hopkins, clearly the medical community, but the public health community and the engineering community and like every corner of this place and
mm,
how it helped the world.
mhm,
That is quintessential. That is like working through the unknown, managing change, working really hard, trying stuff when it failed, trying new stuff, but working really, really together. Towards mission, like
mhm.
what our mission was as an institution, what our mission and place in the world. That is quintessential pursuing excellence, right? And so, thank God we had that competency back.
Right. And that you're giving another great example of reminding people, remember COVID. Do you remember how we all remember when, you know, Pete did this and, Javad did that? Do you remember that? Oh, that's right. So I think that also is a good way to communicate in challenging times. We've been here before. I mean, this is not new, individual faculty member. You have done tough things before. This is not new, division, department, staff, team, lab, clinic. We remember that one time. Remember when? So that storytelling, I think, is a ancient tool we can use to remind ourselves that
Yes.
we have prevailed, we have persevered, we have come across tough times. We've done it before. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get it done. And we're going to all keep an eye on each other and leave no person behind. We're doing it.
Correct. You've got it. You've got it.
Yeah.
But, for all the faculty out there, that are anticipating change in the new year or want to get better in leadership, spend a little time, jot some things down. What are your goals and aspirations for the year? And commit yourself to continuous learning. Like that, one of the things that we do a leadership program for the university, and one of our deans came and, he said that to the group, he addressed the cohort and he said, before I became a dean, I've always worked in academia. My first job was in academia. I've never left academia. And he said, one of the things that I realize the older I get, the more I have to learn about how to be a better leader.
Yeah.
He's like, and I think I'm a pretty good leader, but I can always be better. And I have to work at it, and I have to study it, and I have to be curious about it. And so I think that, none of us have the market cornered on how to do this perfectly. What we just need to commit to is being authentic and trying and understand that we'll make mistakes, acknowledge those mistakes, but get back up and try again. So again, if you fail to talk to all 16 people in those first 20 days of January, that's okay. If you have to go into February, it's all right. But just don't give up on it, is I guess my point. Just keep working at it.
Kathy Forbush. Gosh, we're going to do another whole episode on navigating change in 2025. Absolutely. You can get a hold of Kathy at kforbush@JHU. KFORBUSH@JHU.edu. Kathy, amazing as usual. Thanks you so much for everything you're doing and sharing all your wisdom on the podcast. And if you want to be the podcast, send an email and recommend somebody else or get a hold of Kathy and have her help you figure out how to do leadership and competencies. But thanks again, Kathy. You're the best.
Hello, everyone. It's your podcast producer, Casey Callanan. Make sure to download our newest Faculty Factory ebook, The Academic Medicine Starter Kit. That book, along with 2 other free ebooks, are now available on facultyfactory.org. In addition, I wanted to let you know that as of November 2024, this podcast that you're listening to has had more than 92,000 total downloads and nearly 19,000 total YouTube views. The Faculty Factory website has drawn nearly 52,000 web visits from users in 122 different countries. We'd love to invite you to be a guest on our show, so visit the Faculty Factory website, facultyfactory.org, and send us a message there under the Contact Us link.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.